Hi, my name is Marjorie, and I take care of Tucson Awake and Aware. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. It's a beautiful weekend day, so I really appreciate so many people being here. We're going to have a really fun afternoon, I think. And for our speaker today, we are probably going to wait until he gives us a cue to start asking questions. We're learning as we go in this group, and when you're curious and interesting subject matter, sometimes it's good to get some of the information out before we start to have a conversation with questions. But Mel is very open to audience participation, so he'll guide us in that when it's time to take some questions. Today we have Mel Fabregas, the host of the Veritas show, with us. And Mel kind of defines himself not only as a radio show host, but a parapolitical interviewer. And he might even explain to us a little bit why he chooses the term parapolitical. I choose different terms like fringe topics. Now I'm using parapolitical as opposed to the old and stale and misleading term conspiracy theory, because that just doesn't cut it anymore. That's an old term, and we're moving into newer times. Mel's show is compelling, intelligent, fascinating. I'm a member of his forum, his internet forum as well, and it's probably one of the best internet forums on the internet. There's very bright people there, and I've been learning a lot from it. So I'm very grateful to him for what he provides for the fringe topic community, and I'll let him tell you his story now.
Thank you. Thank you. Be careful.
Yeah, I know. Thanks.
Well, good afternoon to everybody. I see a lot of, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's not that I need a microphone because I can project all the way to a mile away. I know a lot of faces here. And one of the most difficult things for they decided that life as we know it was not what we thought it was. And I know that if you're here, is one, you're open-minded, two, you were willing to consider other realities, other alternatives, and that's what I'm going to tell you about today. I'm going to give you a background of who I am and what I did in order for me to be here with you. I don't have any experience in broadcasting. I'm not an expert on anything. I just want to set the expectations to everybody. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. My parents left, my family left Spain because of Franco persecution. They went to Cuba and they left because of Castro. And I was fortunate to have been born in a beautiful island of Puerto Rico. When I was a child, about 5, 6 years old, I was walking one of our streets in our neighborhood and with my great aunt. And I saw a house, and I stopped her, and I said, that house looks just like your house in Cuba. And she looked at me, and she said, started crying. How do you know? Like, I don't know. I just know that that house just looks like your house. And she said to me, that house looks just like my house. That was the very first time where I thought, what am I saying? Am I a crazy kid here? Anyway. When I was about 7, I had my first crush. You probably remember your first crush when you were a little kid. And one night I had a dream. And the dream showed me how to get to this girl's house and, you know, what directions to take. And I woke up in the morning thinking, what was that all about? I went to school, I came back, and I told my mom, I'm just going to go out to play. So I started walking and walking. And finally, I made it to this house from the dream. I'd never been there. All of a sudden, a big dog comes out, and a lady comes in and says, son, are you lost? And I said, no, I'm here to see Mary. That's not her name. And she said, oh, hold on, let me just get her for you. So, there she comes and said, what are you doing here? I just came to say hello. Goodbye. I lowered my head and started walking away to my house thinking, what just happened here? Who can I talk to? Who can I say, I had a dream that told me how to get there? And And I'm the kind of person that I like things to be methodical. The scientific methodology is part of who I am. So when I see those things and those dreams, to me, back then, they were coincidences. So time went by. I was an altar boy for 10 years. I had my very first disappointment when I found out what Santa Claus was all about. I just thought, how dare you lie to me like this? So 10 years, altar boy, Catholic school, asking my teachers questions, and a few times I was sent to the principal's office because I was questioning what I was being told. And essentially they said, you are not here to question, you are here to follow the book. And to me, no offense to anybody who's religious here, because I was for a long time. And my question was, how can I communicate with extraterrestrials? Of course, everybody looked at me like, oh, there he goes again. And I was waiting for go back to the principal's office. No. This teacher said to me, well, I don't know, but I have an idea. She was a science teacher. She was an electrical engineer. And she said, take a radio, put it on an AM station, which has a lot it goes really, really far, and put it in between stations, you know, where you hear the white noise, and sit down and think about it, and start just connecting with whoever might be out there. And maybe one day, you'll get something. Everybody looked at me like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I thought, okay, there's some hope. Not everybody's telling me that, you know, I shouldn't be doing this or that. Then I started getting into accidents. I was about 6 years old, riding my bike. I see this big pond full of water. I fell into it. I didn't know how to swim. And I remember just falling and falling and falling, thinking, that's it. What a short life this is. And one of my brothers just jumped in and got me out. So that was my first, I don't want to call it near-death experience because it's kind of lame. But years later, I'm in school. I was in a freshman in high school. I remember this, January 19th, 1982 was a Tuesday. And that day, for some reason, I wanted to get all my books out of my locker. I was cleaning my locker, so I brought a big backpack. And I was to ride my bike from home to school. So I took my backpack was full. It was probably about 50 pounds behind me. So I'm riding my bicycle, turning, and a car hit me. I fell head first. And my backpack was pinched in the bumper. If I hadn't had the backpack, I would have been dead. So I broke my arm, you know, scratches all over. But aside from that, nothing happened. I mean, the doctors, the people who were there, the witnesses, just couldn't believe it. Because I was pinched, I looked at my knuckles, they were all like the bones out, and my arm was pinched under the tire. So they had to lift the car and get me out. So that was another close call. I called that my second birth date. Then years later, in 1987, I think it was, coming out with a girlfriend and a couple in the back in our car, coming out of a car tunnel. All of a sudden, the glass shatters, like an explosion in front of me. And I said, what happened here? So I lowered the window, looked, and I parked. And there was a big, like a little hole like this, right in front of me. And then I looked down, in between my legs, a big lock had just come in like a projectile through the glass, and it landed between my legs.
A big what?
Lock, L-O-C-K, like a lock that you put in a cage. Right between my legs. If I had gone 1 second faster, my daughter would not have been born, I guess. Maybe I would have survived. I was in shock again. More like this happened again and again, near-death experiences. I finally moved to Florida. with the company I used to work for, and I'll talk about this later. Moved to Florida, bought my first house at, I was about 22, 1991. And at 11:30 p.m., the alarm of the house would always go off at 11:30 p.m. And I got tired after a couple of weeks of just stop it, stop it, stop it. And I would look at it and it would say, the sensor, something's happening in your room upstairs. By the way, I was single, I was living it by myself. And I would go upstairs looking at the sensor and the glass, change the sensor. The next day, 11:30 p.m., the same alarm would go on and on and on. So on this day, I decided to disconnect it completely, disconnect the whole thing. What could possibly happen, right? 11:30 p.m. the next day, I hear as if you're banging the stairway railing, the metal. Bing! You can feel the vibration, so I just jumped from bed and said, no way, this is just me going crazy. I ran to the stairway, I touched it, and it was vibrating. So I'm thinking, what the heck's going on here? My company transferred me to Mexico City. Mexico, known for, a lot of UFOs and all this stuff. So I lived in a hotel for a couple of months, nothing happened, and I was thinking, great, I escaped from the 11:30 p.m. thing. So I moved to a new apartment, and at 11:30 p.m. I feel chills, like cold, and I see the window open with the curtains flapping, okay? And I thought, maybe I left the window open. And it was one of those windows that you have to lock with a big metal bar. So I said, okay, I'm gonna close it. Next day, before I went to bed, I looked at the window, closed. 11:30 p.m., the window opens again at 11:30 p.m. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, something's going on, and I can't explain it. So I go to the office in the morning, and that day I'm hiring people. I was hiring all day, and it takes me a long time to hire people. I give a couple of days. But this one lady came in. She looked like a witch. I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but she looked like a witch. And don't ask me why I felt compelled to hire her on the spot. So I said, you know what, you're hired. And she said to me, sir, I don't mean to invade your privacy, but are you okay? And I'm thinking, well, who are you to be asking me if I'm okay? I just hired you. You want to get fired? Well, no. So I said, well, this is what's happening. I told her, and she said, okay, do you mind if I borrow your pen, your pocket pen, and I'll bring it to you in the morning? And I thought, okay, well, here's the pen. Here you go, take it. So the next day she comes in and starts telling me things about my past that nobody knows but me. And I'm thinking, what is this? And I told her, okay, now that you told me all this, I'll tell you, this is what's happened to me at 11:30 p.m. And she said, you have, I can't say person, but you have some energies trying to communicate with you, and you're not letting them. And once again, Catholic boy, don't be telling me this stuff. It's like, okay. So I try to meditate. I fall asleep. I still do. So if anybody's a good meditator here, please let me know, because I still want to do it. Months went by. About 9 months later, she comes to the office crying. A lot of stuff happened in the middle, but I'm not going to bore you with that. But she comes to the office kind of crying and says, I say, why, Amalia, why are you crying? Well, because you're leaving. Well, I'm leaving? Yeah, you're leaving the country. I love it here. I'm having a great time. And I was there because of NAFTA. A lot of people hate NAFTA, but I was there for that reason. And she says, you'll get a phone call very soon, and you'll leave. I'm like, okay. Well, not even 24 hours later, the devaluation happened in Mexico. And boom, my rent all of a sudden became, 3 times. And my boss in San Francisco calls up and says, I need to get you out of there. I'm like, well, I guess you do. So I go to the office the next day. Nobody knew about this but me. And she said, you got your phone call, didn't you? Like, oh my God. So we started talking, and she had a list of things that she wanted to tell me. And she said, you're going to be leaving, in such and such state, and you're going to lose a next of kin within the next 12 months. I hadn't had anybody die in my family. She said, you're going to be moving eventually. You're going to do a few stops around the world. But you're going to move to a place that's really warm, has a lot of nature around it. You're going to marry somebody who looks like this. You're going to have X number of children. You're going to be doing this and that. But most importantly, but before she said that, you're going to be a businessman. And most importantly, Your ultimate goal will be to inform the world. And I said, okay, I got it all. Everybody has to die, so maybe somebody's going to die in my family, unfortunately. I get that I'm going to get married, I'm going to move to a place like this, but informing the world? Are you kidding me? What do you mean? Like, in due time, it will be revealed to you. And I have one more thing, she said. She put her hand in her pocket, and she gave me a little red pouch that has some stones inside. And she said, keep this with you at all times. Don't ever open it, or things will start changing. Okay, so I left Mexico to San Francisco. I was being promoted again and again. I was in New Jersey one night in a snowstorm, and everything was great. Oh, by the way, my father passed away just a few months later. I think that's what she meant. But anyway, I'm in New York putting gas, and I guess I dropped my wallet, which had the pouch inside. I get back to the hotel, and I'm thinking, oh my God, no. The cops called me. Oh, we found your wallet, sir. Come pick it up at the station. And I'm thinking, please, please, don't let this bag open. So I go to the station, no money, I didn't care, but the pouch was open. I guess the people thought there were diamonds or something inside of it. I was actually curious to see what it was, and I saw the stones, and the first thing I did was go to the first trash can and disposed of it. I didn't want to deal with that bag open. The position I had at the company was very profitable. Go back to San Francisco, my boss says, I need to talk to you. First thing in the morning on Monday. So I'll go there, and what's going on? Your position has been eliminated. I have been with the company for over 10 years. I was doing profitable things for it, and I thought, oh my God, the pouch? Maybe the pouch? So I have been to Tucson before, and I came here once. No offense, but I came here in a July for the first time. I got out of the plane, and it was like you were baking a pizza. Okay, so I said, you know, beautiful. But I'm from the Caribbean. I need the breeze, I need the ocean, this and that. I don't think I can make it to the desert. But when my boss told me that, he said, but we have a position in Tucson, Arizona. And I said, well, that heat, can I think about it? No. You have to tell me now, otherwise we'll find somebody else, or you'll be without a job. So I had no choice. It's a good thing that I accepted. So I came here, spent another year and a half. I couldn't take the moving around anymore. Met who's now my wife, and they said, okay, next move. I said, no way, I'm not going anywhere this time. They were going to send me to New York this time. So once you say no to a company, you hit the glass ceiling and they make your life impossible. And instead of feeling sorry for myself, thinking, oh, I just don't like my job anymore, you need to take action. Nobody forces you to stay anywhere. You need to make your own decision. So I bought a business, I quit the company, and I got married. All in the same year. And later I'll tell you, most of you know who Camille Harmon is, right? I recently had the pleasure of interviewing Jeff, her husband, and the amount of dots that he connected was just unbelievable, and I'll tell you later. So things started to change. That was 1998 or 99. Fast forward, okay, I haven't talked about UFOs for a couple of decades now. Hold on, let me go back. 1995. I go to a Blockbuster store, and I started seeing people renting the movie Communion. Has anybody seen Communion? Yeah. Fire in the Sky also? Okay. So for some reason, I get reinvigorated again. Look, hold on. I keep forgetting things that I need to tell you. Went to Blockbuster to rent those movies, and I don't know why, but the whole UFO thing reinvigorated me because for years I was being ridiculed. Oh, you and your UFO stuff, come on, get a life. And I always thought, I'm a normal guy. I'm a normal kid who wants to just answers. You look up at the sky at night, and there are billions of stars with billions of planets around it. Why are you telling me that we're the only ones here? It doesn't make sense to me. So anyway, I started renting UFO stuff, and I started getting into it. So fast forward, a lot of stuff happened in between. I got hit by a drunk driver, face on, and I made it. Nothing happened to me. You know, more stuff like that. It was November of 2008. I had a dream this time, and the dream said, take action. It's one of my favorite terms, by the way, take action. And woke up in the morning, and I kept that in my mind, take action. Like, well, what does that mean now? So I turned on the TV, which I hardly do. But that day I decided to turn on the TV, and the first thing I see is Milton Torres. Anybody know who Milton Torres is? Milton Torres was a U.S. Air Force pilot. In 1957, he was ordered to shoot down a UFO while stationed in England. And I thought, wow, this is a U.S. Air Force pilot who's a PhD now, professor at Florida International University. And I said, I have to talk to this man. They had just declassified the files by the British Ministry of Defense. And I kept switching channels. In every channel, CNN, you name them, he was there. But they weren't asking any good questions. They were just letting him talk. So I said, I need to talk to this man. So my wife and I went to dinner that night, and I said, you know what? I want to interview him. By the way, I found his phone number 10 minutes later. I don't know how. I just started looking and found his phone number. So I tell my wife, I need to create a name, because I can't say this is Mel calling you to talk to you. I mean, the guy was flooded with interviews all the time. So I said, I need a name that discusses all the topics: conspiracies, UFOs, alternative health, you name it, everything under the sun. And she says, how about Veritas? I'm like, oh my God, Veritas, truth in Latin, great. So the next day I called Dr. Torres up and I said, you know, loved your story, I would like to interview you. Like, sure, let's do it tomorrow. So on December the 4th of 2008, I interviewed him. The next day, I put that interview on the internet, just to see, you know, to share with people. I get flooded with so much email and hits, about thousands of hits, going to different forums, listening to it. And they were saying, when's the next show? Next show. And I'm thinking, I don't have any broadcasting experience. I've never interviewed anybody in my life. You know, this just happened. So Stephen Bassett, some of you know who he is, emails me and says, can you please forward his Milton Torres' information, because I'd like to have him on the X conference, which is a conference he conducts every year. And I said, sure, but can I interview you too? And that was my first real interview. I had to create a website. It took me about half an hour to just create something really, really quickly. And then people kept asking. I was going to do the show every 2 weeks. They said, no, once a week, once a week. And I have a couple of businesses in town, plus a family, so I can't do this that often. So I did it for 6 months. And it kept growing and growing and growing. And as I talk to people every single week, it's almost as if my mind started to change. Now that this is all out for you to understand, let me tell you how I woke up. And I think probably this happened to a lot of you. You know, I was a Democrat, I was a Republican, I was just following the party line, I'm still a patriot, but you know what I mean. I'm all for, you know, Saddam Hussein did it, let's go bomb him. All right? That's how I used to think before. In 2005, after Bush got reelected again, questionable again, right? But the second time, one of my brothers emailed me a presentation. And the presentation, a hole in the Pentagon. You know what I'm talking about here? Okay. And I saw it, and he says, look, I see planes every day. The 757, they have titanium engines. That's stronger than steel. So how is it that there's a hole in the middle and the wings are nowhere to be found? And I said, how dare you even question our well-intended government that they may have something to do with this? I didn't talk to him for months. But that thought in my mind kept just bothering me, thinking, no, there's no way. I kept going from no way, ignore it, to what if? But this time I couldn't call my brother and say, you know what if, right? So I started looking on my own. And I started looking at 9/11 that day and what happened. And then I started connecting dots. A lot of you probably heard about the Reichstag fire in 1933, I believe, in Germany. Okay? Reichstag fire was supposedly a communist person who came and did it. And they blamed it on that person. And Hitler immediately enacted the, what was that? We had the Patriot Act. They have almost the same name, the Patriot Act, the equivalent of the Patriot Act there. So, you know what the Hegelian dialectic is. Problem, reaction, solution. What was the problem? Well, somebody A communist did this. Now we need to enact new laws, take security away from the people, freedoms to bring security. And I started connecting dots. You know, Reichstag fire, 9/11. Maybe 9/11 was a Reichstag fire. What if the Nazis lost the war but won the peace? What if the Nazis are still here? And I started looking into this, and I started connecting dots, and I could not believe it, that the same scenario was developing here. They failed when the Nazis lost the war, but what if the script's being taken back here? And then I started finding out about Operation Paperclip. Most of you know what that is. They brought a lot of the scientists from Germany here and to Russia. I was not the same person anymore. I had to call my brother and said, I'm sorry. You're right. There's no way that a plane crashed in the Pentagon. And then I started looking at the towers. And wait a minute. How can that fall faster than a billiard ball? And what happened to the towers? Where did the towers go? And I don't know if you know the name Dr. Judy Wood. But from today, you'll know who she is. I had a lot of people asking me to interview her, and I hadn't heard of her. And I said, you know, why is she not on Coast to Coast AM and some of the big outfits? And then I found out that she's the only scientist, a mechanical engineer that looked into what happened that day. And she just recently wrote an excellent book, 500 pages of the best information. If you think you know about 9/11, if you haven't read that book, you don't know the story. And she doesn't go into the conspiracies of who did it. She just wanted to know what happened. Because at noon that day, the amount of rubble was only a couple of stories tall. It's impossible. Something was used that day. She calls it a directed energy weapon. And we're going to go start now connecting dots. And I am sorry if anybody feels offended here and still thinks that 19 Arabs with box cutters did it. I'm sorry. Anybody? Can you raise your hand if you still believe that story? You'll be surprised. Some people still do, and they get offended. But that morning, did you know there was a hurricane standing next to New York City? Did you know that? And the media was not reporting it anywhere? You know what could happen if that hurricane came along to New York City and flooded the city? Talking about millions of people dead. That hurricane came and stood there for 2 days standing. Okay? And if you go and watch, some of the news were reporting it other than New York City. Why was that hurricane there? And you start connecting dots. Dr. Wood theorizes that the energy that hurricane, it was a dynamo, it was used to propel the directed energy weapon that was used that day. Okay? Another thing is, when people were falling, okay, there were, I hate to sound graphic, if you throw somebody from 100 stories, they fall, maybe, a limb may be displaced, but this was like almost throwing tomatoes. They were just almost like a piece of water falling on the ground, which means that some kind of microwave or something. And she showed me some pictures of people who were outside. You're interested in UFOs. That's why you're here, right? As a kid, I just wanted to know more and more about UFOs, and everybody would think that I was a lunatic. And I remember it was college or later, and I was in an office reading a book. And this co-worker of mine comes to me and says, "Why are you reading that?" And I said, "Because I'm interested." Like, do you really believe in that stuff? Like, well, I don't use the word believe. To believe is to just take things at face value without any evidence. That's why one of my mottos is, I don't want to believe, I want to know. Be skeptical, but don't close your mind. He was a very religious person. And I said, okay, let me ask you a question. You read the Bible all the time, and you go to church, right? And Do you believe? Well, yes, I do. Okay, so you're criticizing me here because I'm reading a UFO book, because I think when I look outside, there's a probability that life is not exclusive to planet Earth. And there's a preponderance of images, video, people, witness testimony, traced evidence. How can you prove your point? Immediately he got offended and he walked away. Why is it that when we talk to people about a different approach or perspective, they immediately see you as you're trying to agitate, you're trying to be subversive, different? But that's just the way it should be. You should always be able to ask questions and get answers. And if somebody doesn't know, they should not have an opinion. All right? And let me just clarify what I'm saying. If you tell somebody, you think we can go to Mars? And they say no, then don't give me that opinion. Just tell me I don't know. I don't know about rocketry. I don't know about human beings being able to sustain that much in space and low gravity, blah, blah, blah. But just don't say don't say no, it's impossible, because the book says that we're here, on Earth. So I keep just opening my eyes. And every time I will wake up, my wife, who's totally, by the way, she's never listened. I've had, 120 shows by now. She hasn't listened to one. We respect each other. We like different things. I love her dearly. But this is one thing that she appreciates that I do. And I started waking up in the morning and changing, almost as if the show I did the night before had a profound effect on me. And I kept it quiet. But she would tell me, what's happening to you? You're not the same person I married. But this is getting better. I like you now better. Because before, I would be sitting down watching Fox News. Yeah, go, ha, ha, ha. And she hated that. Hated that. And I was getting depressed listening to certain radio personality out there that I'm not going to say names. Somebody who uses a bullhorn and talks really loud. I'm not going to say names. I appreciate what he does, but I have a different approach. Then Dr. Stephen Greer. Anybody knows who he is? The Disclosure Project. 2001 May. Then 9/11 happened, and all of a sudden, the Disclosure Project just went to oblivion for a little bit. Although, it is the most watched documentary ever in the UFO circle. Over 1 billion people, 1 billion, not million, watched that. So, that ended right there. And then I have to give credit to Kerry Cassidy and Bill Ryan from Project Camelot. Anybody knows who they are? Well, I just interviewed them last week because they had some forces that separated them about a year ago, and I wanted to know why, and they gave me an interview. But anyway, they came along in 2006, I think it was, or 7, I don't remember, and I thought, wow, these two people came out of nowhere and started interviewing people, and getting information for all of us. And they motivated me. I thought, maybe if I do a show, maybe I'll get more answers. And I started talking to people. Zachariah Sitchin, anybody know who he is? Zachariah Sitchin. I tried for a year, and he finally gave me, it was his last interview. And I remember discovering new things. And when I do a show, I have to really dig into the person. And I found that NASA, allegedly, in 1983, found another planet in our solar system. And they're so sure about it that the only thing left is to name it. And I said, Zachariah, why isn't this information more public? Well, he said, the question should be, what would be the consequences if this information became public? And the question is, if any of you saw the movie 2012, if the government knows that something is coming, would they tell you? Anybody that thinks yes, please raise your hand. Okay. I had a discussion with people in my forum, and you'd be surprised. About 50% said yes, 50% said no. And I asked them both sides why. The ones who said yes because we had the right to know. And the one who said no said, if there's nothing we can do about it, why even create the chaos until the time comes? And I have to tell you, I'm on the fence. If you ask me if I was in control, I would like people to be able to say goodbye to their families. So I guess I would say yes. I had another person on the show, I'm not going to reveal the name, but we met at an Indian reservation. He was dressed in black, just like me today. And I really felt like Fox Mulder from the X-Files. And here I am with this man telling me all this stuff. And he said, I'm going to tell you this, don't ever say my name, but a few years ago, some people came home and they took me out of the house. They put a hood over my head, locked me in a car, and took me to an undisclosed facility. I was sitting down in this room. They took the hood over my head. I was alone. And George Herbert Walker Bush comes in. Okay? This man was traveling around the world to ancient monuments, let's call them hidden archaeology, connecting dots, and he found that all the secrets of technology, anti-gravity, is all there in stone. And he started going to the speaking range and talking to people. So Bush came to him and said, how in the world do you know this? And if you don't know what the Annenerba, anybody heard what the Annenerba is? It's a brain tank. I know you know, Jim. It's a brain tank from the Nazi times. And what they did back then, they all went to Tibet, just one example, trying to get all this knowledge because the Aryan race thought they came from there. Well, the Annenerba continues. So Bush is part of the Annenerba, so I'm told. And he was saying, from this moment on, you will not be talking about this or else. So now this person talks, he's been on my show, but he does not talk about the technology. So there you have another example. But then I said to him, you know, the date that everybody talks about now is 2012. Anybody here thinks something's going to happen in 2012? Please raise your hand.
Political?
Well, something of high significance to the human race. Okay, only a few, right? And I say only a few, and I'm glad to see that, because a lot of you really are awakened in comparison to the rest of the population. And I don't say this to be condescending, because I had one other guest, and I'll be referring to guests, because I'm not an expert in anything. Some people say, why didn't you pursue a PhD? You did your master's and this and that. And I said, because if I did, they would put me in a silo, and they would control me. And you learn A topic or B topic or C topic, and all of a sudden you're there in that pedestal. And all of a sudden you are told to look at people like, you know, those people down there, they don't talk about this highfalutin stuff that we can talk about. Okay? So I decided, no, I don't want to be an expert at anything. I want to learn. I'm an empty cup in my brain. So whenever I talk to somebody, I just absorb. So I asked him, 2012, what's happening? What's coming? You've been connected. And he said, look, if something's going to happen on 2012, it's because it's all of a sudden, and we have planes flying that day doing drills. And guess what happened? The real thing happened. And all those planes were told to stand down, allegedly. Now, go to Haiti last year. What was the United States government the day before doing? Disaster, earthquake drills. All right? And last year when I interviewed Dr. Agnew, I found some information that's a little bit not that great, but he said, by the way, I have to thank the Israelis who were here in the morning, just a few hours after the earthquake, putting hospitals and medical facilities and helping everybody. And I said, okay, I'm not going to talk about what I found. What I found was that they found, other people, not them, boxes, shoe boxes filled with corneas. Corneas. Right. And this year he came back to the show, and I didn't want to go there because that's a very hot topic when you talk about it. And I'm not attacking Israel. I have many friends from Israel who are great people, but you know, there are certain groups there that are questionable. He started talking and he said they were in Haiti 8 hours later. 2 hours after the earthquake happened, they were already in the airport, ready to leave with the medical, the nurses, the doctors, everybody. So he disclosed that to me. You know, a lot of new things. But let me go back to 2012 again. I asked this man, if something happens in 2012, it will be because it is caused. By who? We can talk about it later. But then I said, you know what? Think about it. A lot of religious people talk about Armageddon, rapture. Remember back in 1999, how many companies made money selling the cure for Y2K? It was an industry, right? And what happened? Actually, some little computers, it was not what they were predicting. Oh, missiles are going to be deployed and we're going to just die, da, da, da. But the problem with the 2012 story is that a lot of people are waiting for it. They're expecting something to happen. And what Henry Kissinger says all the time? We are what?
Useless eaters.
Useless eaters, right? And even royalty in the UK, they say, who was it? He said, if I were to be reborn, I want to come as a virus and get rid of all the useless eaters. So when you have all that meme out there trying to get rid of all of us, when 2012 comes, if something happens, it's because they created it. I used to work in the corporate world, and I used to have access to companies that required me to wear a security clearance. And I cannot say certain things, but I remember Bechtel was one of them. One of the largest construction companies in the world, based in San Francisco, so they were back then. And I know they were building underground facilities for decades. And you wonder, you know, we have bridges that are collapsing, we have schools that are in disrepair, but you continue going to wars and nobody complains. Trillions and trillions of dollars. On September 10th, 2001, you know what happened that day? Okay, well, for those who don't know what happened that day, Donald Rumsfeld came to Congress and basically said, folks, we lost $2.3 trillion. Yeah. My very first job was at a grocery store. I was a bagger, cashier, and I lost $50 one day. I was suspended for 2 weeks. But here comes Mr. Secretary of Defense saying that we lost $2.3 trillion and nothing happens. I guess they were testing us to see if we say that we lost so much money and nobody does a thing, we can run away with murder.
I think it was intentional, though. I think what they were trying to do was let that fact out and then have it just totally be eclipsed by 9/11 the following day, which they knew was going to happen.
You see? I love it. I love coming to a place where people are awake about this. Because who's going to question? I mean, I remember Chandra Levy. Remember her?
Yeah.
It was all over the news the day before. What happened the day after? Nobody even talked about it. 9/11 took over. It was a script. That day, in the afternoon, 45 minutes before, the reporters were saying, and Building 7 has collapsed. Yeah. And it was behind. They were feeding them. They were feeding them information for them to read. If you think the media tells you real news, wake up. And if you're here, Tucson Awake and Aware, great name by the way, you probably know the story. The media used to be owned, maybe 20 years ago, about 75 companies used to own the media. There was some transparency. Reporters were proud because of their jobs. They were transparent. They would report. They were neutral. They would not state an opinion. That's no longer the case. 10 years ago, about 23 companies owned the media. About until a year ago, 7, now 6 companies own the media. I call it the media-opoly. There's no way you can get your information from the media. And they're all, if you look at who owns them, oil companies, pharmaceutical companies, it's who's who of the hydra that has control over the entire world. Somebody like me is probably in danger when I talk to people. But the thing is, I'm not a lunatic. I am a normal person who went to school, who's a businessman. I tend to think that I'm respected in the community, who woke up. So nobody can touch me with that. So 2012, if something happens, it's because it's going to be created. And it's a great opportunity to thin the herd. You get rid of a few billion people. You know, it was an earthquake, the New Madrid fault. 2 weeks ago, they were doing disaster drills about the New Madrid fault, and FEMA's talking about it. And they were asking them, really think that the New Madrid fault may collapse? And the person said, well, you know, we always have to be thinking ahead. Oh, great, just like 9/11. You were thinking ahead that morning. You were thinking ahead about Haiti, and now you're thinking ahead about this. Can our economy continue being the way it is by the Federal Reserve pumping fake money to it? When is it enough? When do we say, you know, Bernanke, helicopter Bernanke. You know what he's called, helicopter Bernanke, right? Because he said that even if the economy gets so bad, we'll be out there with helicopters dropping money. Okay? He said that. It's on the record. You can YouTube it. So when you have, everybody knows what the Federal Reserve is, or am I sounding redundant if I say it? Well, in 1913, a bunch of the wealthiest people in the United States got together, and that was after a few of them went to the Titanic. And the ones who went to the Titanic were all against the Federal Reserve. How come those who were against the Federal Reserve died? All of them died. And the ones who were in favor got the lifeboats. Makes you wonder, right? They did that in secrecy. Christmas, 1913. And Woodrow Wilson signed it. And ever since, we've been with recessions. I call this a depression. Don't tell me this is a recession, because it's not. And what happened a few years later, less than 15 years later, we had the Depression. But what I'm telling you is, don't be afraid, be aware. A lot of people talk about these subjects and feel embarrassed. I can't tell you how many times I've been disinvited or invited out of a social gathering before I did my show. And my wife would say to me, you need to shut up. I mean, you're here with a bunch of conservatives talking about this, and all of a sudden they start talking about the Arabs, and we need to go out there and bump the hell out of them. And I would say, hold on, how do you prove that a lot of them have been found to be alive? Did you know that? Where are you getting your information? Well, I'm going to alternative media. Oh, if you don't watch Fox News and CNN, then you're not, you know? So we have to do what we have to do. You come here, you wake up. And slowly, I started getting emails from people. And the emails were, my life has never been the same ever since I started listening to your show. And I don't say this to you know, toot my own horn, because I don't. I'm privileged to be behind a microphone. I'm just one member of the audience asking the questions. But the fact that we're all getting this information, and every time I hear a show, I learn something new. Back in 1991 or 92, I started feeling weak. I was always working out, and weak and headaches. I thought really that I was developing something, multiple sclerosis. So I went to the doctor. He was a dermatologist for something else. And I said, doctor, you know, I know that you don't deal with this, but I'm only 22, 23, and I feel like I'm aging fast, and I have headaches, I can't sleep. And she said, well, let's talk about what you eat and drink. And I said, okay, I eat Chinese food every day. Because I'm on the road, I eat Chinese food, I love it. Like, okay. She started laughing. Okay, what do you drink? Well, I eat about a gallon of Diet Pepsi every day. Like, okay. And I looked at her, like, why is she laughing? Why is she, you know, cringing? She says, you need to stop those two things now. And you need to stop them because you'll die if you don't. Like, really? So I loved eating Chinese food and that. And it was the MSG, monosodium glutamate, and the aspartame. I stopped it in less than 7 days. I swear to you, I felt like I was 10 years younger. Totally, all the pains went away. And I thought to myself, my God, if this is happening to me, a healthy man, this might be happening to other people. So I said, one day, I'll go on a crusade if I can to help people about this. I'm not the type of person that goes out there trying to shove my beliefs on you, no. Michael Tessarian, anybody knows who he is, Michael Tessarian? Great researcher from Ireland. We had this conversation and I said, Michael, A lot of people, you see them driving their car like zombies, they just in a daze. How can we make those people wake up? Because first of all, you cannot make anyone do what they don't want to do. You live your life, lead by example, be the change you want to be. But you cannot go out there trying to shove your beliefs, because there's no difference between that and a religious zealot coming here telling you, you need to do this or you're not going to be, salvation will be gone for you. So, years later, last year, I invited to the show Dr. Betty Martini. Anybody heard the name Betty Martini? Well, she is the biggest crusader when it comes to all the stuff that's in our food. She blew my audience away, even me that I knew. She said one day she was at a grocery store shopping, one day, and she saw two ladies grabbing big cases of Diet Coke. And she overheard one of the ladies saying, well, John and I have been trying for 5 years and nothing happened, so I guess we'll have to adopt. And she overheard that, and she saw her putting all the Diet Coke inside, and she went to the lady and said, honey, you can't get pregnant because you're drinking that stuff. Like, how dare you come and tell me that stuff? So she gave her a piece of paper, and Dr. Martini, little old lady, grabbed the Diet Coke and put it back in the shelf. While the lady still went and put it back in the cart. But she went to the doctor. She was going to this fertility clinic and said, this lady has big balls. And she came to me and told me right there in front of my friend that this is why I'm not getting pregnant. And she gave the doctor the paper that she gave her. It was a documented paper by many doctors explaining how aspartame can cause infertility. And the doctor started reading it and said, oh my God, this may be true. This is the chief doctor of the fertility clinic. And he said, well, we need to look at this. Why don't we meet all the patients and see what happens? In less than 90 days, more than 70% of the patients got pregnant. Imagine how many children have died because of that. Michael J. Fox, anybody knows? Well, I know you probably know who he is. Back to the Future and all that stuff. He developed Parkinson's at the age of 30 and did not say it, did not come up publicly until 7 years later. So anybody know why he developed Parkinson's? He was the spokesperson for Diet Pepsi. Some people have been trying to interview him. He doesn't talk about it. Apparently there's a confidentiality agreement. And I think one person tried, and he cried because he doesn't want people to think that because he was the spokesperson, he may be responsible for so many people drinking that poison. So if you drink aspartame, diet products, it's your choice, free will, but I'm telling you that it can kill you. One lady called him and says, oh yeah, John is dying, he's in bed and this and that. Like, what? John is dying? Why is he dying? What's going on? And he just started naming all the symptoms. And Dr. Martini said, is he drinking any kind of diet soda? As a matter of fact, he is. Well, he only has about a week left to live, so we might as well keep it. Like, no, stop it. Guess what happened? He didn't die after all. He all of a sudden became normal. So how many people walk out there with symptoms of MS, people who die of cancers? There was a football player in Florida a few years ago, died, 22 years old. He was always in a diet. And he died, they opened him up, and one of the symptoms of aspartame, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving you, I'm not an attorney, so no legal advice, no doctor, no medical advice. But they opened him up during the autopsy, and they found his lungs almost liquefied. He didn't smoke. That's one of the symptoms of aspartame poisoning, when you drink too much. So that's another thing. And now, I think it's time for me to sit, yeah, okay.
Let's pause. We have about 3 minutes to go on the tape. So we're just going to pause for a moment while I change over the tape.
Okay. And then I think we can do questions from this moment on, because we can go anywhere you want.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
You're just so alive.